Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first edition of our European Conference on Security and Authentication. We're pleased to have Suyin Arts as our host and moderator for this conference. Suyin is based in Belgium. She is a seasoned TV presenter, keynote speaker, and business leader. Let's welcome Suyin.
Thank you so much for this nice introduction, Stephanie. Very welcome from my side. I am indeed Suyin Arts, your host and moderator, and I'm really delighted to be so. And I'm very curious to hear everything that we are going to learn today. This event is organized by Cromnix, a marketplace to connect European tech providers with international corporate buyers. And the idea is to match tech needs with relevant solutions. But I'll pass the floor now to our fifth speaker, who will take care of this fifth and the sixth presentation, Jim Barkdoll, Chief Commercial Officer of AXIOMATICS. And as I said, headquarters in Stockholm in Sweden, but also offices in Chicago in the USA. And let me first start, Jim, by welcoming you this morning, or at least where I am, it's morning. I don't know where you are. If you're in Chicago, it's probably not morning. And thanks again for the sponsoring of this conference. In your first presentation, I will give you about 10 minutes to talk about how to authenticate and authorize remote employees anywhere in the world with the attributed-based access control. So please go on, Jim. Tell us more about AXIOMATICS orchestrated authorization and how it all works.
Let me get my screen sharing here. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning, Jim.
You seen the full screen?
I do see your full screen. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Again, thanks to the amazing presenters that have gone before, and it's a really good setup to the conversation that we're talking about here today, which is the really important first step, especially as some of my colleagues talked about here in a Nist best practices or a zero trust format of having authentication and the identity done first. So that is paramount. It's something that organizations have been working on, and you can see through the types of technologies available today, really amazing advances. And so what that talks about is the who and the what, right? Who are these, is this person or machine who they say they are, and what is the initial things that they should be able to do? As we've advanced into more advanced technologies, certainly cloud services, the dynamic ability of cloud services, microservices that we're building, the next focus is really around the authorization portion, which refers to the when, where, why, how of a user to do something in my application or with my data. So now I've authenticated this person either by biometrics or these other amazing ways that our presenters have talked about. And now once they're in, I want to verify with other pieces of information, what should that user be able to do? This follows a topic we'll talk about here in a moment, zero trust strategy. This follows the market maturity model set by Nist, for example, as one organization about how to establish a zero trust best practices security enterprise. And so starting with at level one, of course, the initial first step you have to have is authentication. This is talking about identity, governance tools, multi-factor authentication, all of those things, again, to verify the identity of the user. Once we've got identity, now we want to add in real time the types of entitlements, the type of context-based policies that additionally allow maybe different forms of access. So a really good example of this, believe it or not, with all of the craziness in the United States, sports gambling is not legal in every state in the United States. When you're traveling from state to state, you're constantly being asked to authenticate on the application, but there's also other policies, including location, that then provide you with different experience inside the application on whether or not you're in a state where gambling is legal or not legal, for example. This is a good example of an additional location-based policy that I would provide. And so when we talk about authorization, this is not new, right? We've been building all of us as applications, data companies providing these services, we've been building authorization into our applications since we started building them. The difficulty is, though, if you look at the normal trajectory at how we've done this, a normal path might be that the business would ask IT to build a new application or provide a new service. Of course, IT is going to design that with the application, the intent, how that's going to work with the user in mind. What happens in most instances then, if not relying on just role-based, and maybe you want to add some additional forms of authorization there, the developer would build that into his or her code. So now what you've done is you've created a silo of where this information is, and it's not repeatable. You can't use it again. Now it's inside the code. You've got to continually QA and test that, and as you do upgrades, these rules are built in there. So why doesn't this work, right? So now as we talk about zero trust and we talk about the dynamic security issues that are facing us today, how fast we're rolling out these new services, the expectations we all have about how quick on demand, how quick am I being authenticated and authorized to do something in an application. And then, of course, the need for the finite resources we have, especially in things like the development organization, which are always in demand. Is there a way to limit some of the workload from an authorization standpoint and move this off to really what we would call a best practices, externalizing the authorization from these applications and data sources and bring it into a central location to where what we refer to as orchestrated authorization. So now in this model, I can take all of the different attributes, including from the amazing presenters that are just talking, that this device or this person is who he or she says she is. And now I want to add in, additionally, based on these other checks in real time, it could be from multiple different data sources. I've created a policy that says, based on all these conditions, change the interface, change the access, permit or deny someone to do something inside my application, or view certain types of data or not view certain types of data. And so the outcomes of this then is, of course, zero trust. We're constantly reinforcing and checking in real time. Has any condition about this user changed? And every one of these events now is logged. It's all auditable. I can tell a policy to an auditor in real time that says, this is how my organization is abiding by a policy. And or I can show a history of logs about how many times someone has been permitted or denied, and I can see trends in my business that way. And so what you get before, of course, is we've got siloed authorization strand by strand. And when you implement orchestrated authorization, now I've got reusability. Those policies that I've created, I can apply that across multiple applications. The developers can point to this central location. You can truly use policy as code in this instance. And so now you've removed that step from the developer. They can focus on just building quality applications or integrating with quality applications. And all of this, again, is now in a central location that is doing the authorization in real time for your organization. And just a few quick things here on us. Why are we the right company for this? We literally created this space. Our founders were the editors originally of the code. This was their doctoral thesis from university. And we've been at this for organizations for over 15 years, building and implementing this. What we're starting to see is that the move from early adopters and innovators, maybe organizations that ran into this a little bit earlier than, say, the cloud explosion of the microservices. Now, because of those additional components, this is becoming an issue in real time for every size organization, small, medium, or large. So we're happy to be supporting that new trend. And that's what I have.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And the pictures showed us very clearly the before and after with AXIOMATICS. You were talking also a little bit about zero trust security. Actually, I would like to ask you, why is zero trust so important? Before we go into the Q&A session, maybe let's start talking about the zero trust first, and then see whether people have questions for you, and we will group them all together.
Yeah, no, happy to do that. So we'll go into the zero trust portion now. So first, it's important for everyone here attending, and people may or may not know this. Zero trust is not one solution. It's not one product. Zero trust is a best practices concept. It was originally developed and introduced by John Kindervag in 2007. It's when I was fortunate to meet him and start working with him. But it's evolved, and it's evolved as the complexity of our ecosystem, our technology ecosystem has evolved, right? The amount of data, the amount of sensitive information that is now available, the power of big data, and now what can I do, and what are the types of ways that I am capitalizing on that as a business? Of course, you're creating more and more risk of this sensitive information, and you want to protect that. The best example of what is zero trust, the way that John would always explain it, would be from the U.S. President's side, is how the Secret Service. So they are constantly verifying, constantly trusting no one. They know what the policy is, and the policy is that no one gets access in this instance, right? So it's a very good example of creating a very tight perimeter around what is in this case an executive protection, right? So, and you can relate that to your data. There's certain types of information that only a very small amount of people would want to get. You would want to have access to, or to be able to do certain things in, based on timing and conditions, and that can change in real time. So maybe for a moment I'm allowing secret access, and the next hour I'm not allowing that secret access anymore, based on your policies. And that is what is at the heart of zero trust. Zero trust basically says there is no implicit trust. It doesn't matter that you are who you say you are. I'm also going to check every time that you are who you say you are, and I'm going to check by other conditions that are going to map to that and follow my policy. And so when you talk about Nist best practices or zero trust best practices, steps 1 and 2 always listed are authentication, which we've talked at length about today, and then authorization, as we've talked about how AXIOMATICS can augment and change how we've been doing authorization in a zero trust world. There's a couple resources that I would like to point out. All of these are super valuable. Of course, the Nist location for anyone that's interested. This is not just a US policy. There's best practices here for any of us around the globe. Of course, AXIOMATICS is a global company. This just happens to be one really good publication on a zero trust architecture. Another brand new item that just came out is the Zero Trust Market Map, and it's by John Kindervag and Dr. Chase Cunningham, John that I just referenced. This is the demoforum.com. This gives an outline from an architecture standpoint of all the vendors of a best practice that might go into how would you build and represent a zero trust architecture in your own enterprise.
Okay, fantastic. I just took a picture of all your resources, but that's a bit stupid that I did that, because I like to tell everybody that is following us that we will share the recording of today's webinar with everybody that maybe did not stay with us until the end, or that just hopped in after a while. But in any case, we will send all the people that were registered the whole webinar with your slides, but at least I have your resources. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jim, for being a sponsor on this event, and also for your interesting presentations. Stephanie, I'd like to ask you whether you have had already some questions, or you have some questions yourself for Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. We've got a question about zero trust. So we are constantly hearing about breaches and attacks, ransomware, malware, cyber attacks. How would zero trust help mitigate that risk?
It's a slippery slope. You know, as we've seen, best practices security, hackers are and breaches are amazing. So there's always going to be risk points. The concept of zero trust is limiting those risk points, right? So if I've got employees that maybe are at a risk, if I lock down or I add additional zero trust capabilities around that user, I can limit the exposure. So for example, if I've got some type of sensitive data, or I've got a super user, as we've seen in the recent, some of the recent breaches where people come in and get that access, you can limit that again by the steps of authentication and authorization. By adding these additional checks, you can limit the impact or limit the scope of these types of breaches, or in some cases prevent them. But I would never say zero trust is going to 100% eliminate breaches, because hackers are amazing, and it's a true force out there that we should all be aware of all the time. But zero trust will help limit and set you up for a better security experience and a better chance of preventing certainly some of the more common types of breaches.
Thanks, Jim. A lot of presenters today have discussed different authentication models, face biometric recognition, also the fingerprint recognition. Can you explain how authorization is different from authentication? I mean, once the user is connected to his or her personal work account, I mean, what happens next in the background, in the back office?
Yeah, it's a great question. So whether it's an employee or a customer on your side, what is a work account, right? So because we're creating multiple applications, multiple interfaces, there might be multiple ways that our customers or our employees are accessing different information. Of course, again, we talk about microservices. Once you log in, do you want to give the same access to everybody? So in authentication, verifies, puts some type of static access around that user and says he or she can do this or access this application. It's once they're authenticated and now they're in it, do you want to allow them to do the same things as the person next to them? So think, for example, you're promoted or you're moved from one work group to another work group. Authorization would have a policy that checks and says in real time, you're authenticated as this user, and now you're in this work group. You get to view this page on an application, or you don't get to view this page on an application, or you get to view this data, or it's masked to you because based on your location or time of day or any number of other factors. So it's adding those other factors that are the how, when, and why of that you want someone to be able to do something in your application, your data. It is the different. That's the next step above and beyond the authentication portion.
Thanks, Jim. Your development team says that they currently different development team says that they currently add authorization capabilities via an internal process. So why should we move away from this practice?
Yeah. So you're referring to building in authorization into an application. So again, that's what happens today in many instances. A developer, he or she is taking input from the business and saying, in this application, I want users to be able to do these things. I want this type of access created inside my application. And they could actually even code in some of the events that we could do today. They could reach out to external sources and say, based on these conditions, do that. But now it's built into just that application. It's also not audited in that location. And you've got to constantly update that policy now as you update that. You've got to update those pieces of authorization as you update the product. You've got to QA, test those lines of code that the developer is creating, and it's not repeatable. So when you externalize it and you pull out that authorization into a central location, that developer can point to that central location now for that policy. They no longer have to worry about coding this. So you're going to save time and effort from a development situation, and you're able to leverage those central policies across many applications so that you're not repeating the same work over and over, which is what happens for most of us today.
Yes, thanks, Jim. What if a company has like 10,000 employees or 20,000 employees? How long would the deployment process is? Because each person, they need to also decide which groups can access which resources. So how long does it take to deploy this process?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, first, just to put everyone at ease when you're talking about this and what we've been at for better over the last 10 years, our customers today majority of them are the global 1,000. So we're talking about some of the largest enterprises in the world. You're talking about time at which you want people to be able to access information, be compliant, extremely tough conditions that we've built this and matured this product under. So today, this is deployed across, in certain enterprises, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications. And in some of those instances, they're using this for both internal employees from anywhere from a small shop, 50 under 50 employees, all the way up to over 100,000 employees. And they're also using this externally. We've got especially some of our large financial customers that use this for their mobile banking, for their consumers. So you're talking about millions and millions of users being authorized via our platform in real time. And so those deployments, it's truly a journey. The easy answer is we can deploy and set up the platform and put any organization in the position to start creating policies within 2 weeks. We call that our quick start program. So setting up the technology and the way that our product works internally is not the difficult part, but we will work with you on the journey of what types of policies, how do you want to create these policies, and what do you expect the user experience to be? And that's an ongoing, continued part of our methodology that we provide everybody about how fast and when they want to mature.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay. Interesting indeed to see, Jim, that people, you onboard them as a customer and then you follow them in an agile way to continue their process and think about other steps to put in in regards with authentication. Well, I think this was a very interesting presentations of you, Jim.